One of the great things about riding a bicycle in the city is that you get to see things that you might miss from a car window. Little architectural details, interesting landscapes, and even the most mundane streets come to life when you're on the saddle of a bicycle. Just the other day, while riding my bike to the Riverfront Trail, I came across this statue. I'd probably ridden by it maybe 100 times while riding down South Broadway, but I never really noticed it until last week. Maybe it was because it was a particularly bright and clear day. Maybe I saw it because I was looking at the right direction at the right time. Or maybe it had something to do with Holy Week. One of the songs that comes to my mind on this day is that old spiritual, "Were you there when they crucified my Lord?" Mary was there. She was there. The mother of Jesus was there. Sacred images often Sacred images oftentimes depict her sitting at the foot of the cross, looking up at her son. But I imagine that the Roman police did not let her get that close. I imagine that she probably sat watching from a distance, in isolation from the one that she loved, unable to speak the words of comfort that only a mother can speak, unable to touch the flesh that she brought into the world. She stood watching Jesus at a distance, in isolation, probably no closer than the length of a Roman spear, which just happened to be, believe it or not, about 6 foot long. Good Friday is a story about isolation. Mary's isolation from her son, the disciples' isolation from their teacher, Jesus' isolation on the cross. He was placed there by the empire as a sort of vaccine, if you will, injected into the ground to protect the powers and the principalities from the disease of freedom and liberation that was spreading through Jesus' movement. But most of all, Good Friday is a story about our isolation from God and from one another, and the pain, the destruction, and the violence that isolation inflicts, particularly on the least of these. Mary stands here in isolation, just off of South Broadway. Now I imagine that there was a time when this part of town was a residential neighborhood, and at that time, Mary stood prominently on this street corner for everyone to see. But now she's off the beaten path. She is overshadowed by overpasses, derelict buildings, and an interstate highway system named after a military leader. But in some ways, I think that's actually a bit more biblical. Because back in Jerusalem, back at Golgotha, back by Calvary's cross, Mary probably stood there largely unnoticed. Just another victim. A poor peasant, excluded and isolated from the means of the empire's grace, standing in the shadow of Roman progress, victory, violence, and virtue. In many ways, Mary epitomizes and symbolizes the isolation that many of us are feeling today on this Friday, this day of ultimate isolation. But if you look at the base of Mary's statue, you'll see that she is not Our Lady of Perpetual Sorrows. She is not Mary, Queen of Defeat. She is not the mother of hopeless tragedies. She is Saint Mary of Victories, a title that might seem a bit ironic on this particular day, when Mary seems so powerless, and in this particular place where Mary seems so small. And yet she remains Saint Mary of Victories, because I believe that even at the cross, even at Calvary, even when she was isolated from her son, even when she was forced to stand 6 feet away from the one that she loved, even then, I've got to believe that the song of victory ran through her head and through her heart. The song that she once shared with her cousin Elizabeth. The song that she once surely sang to her baby boy. The song that probably got her into a heap of trouble. The song that went like this. My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. My spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he has looked with favor on his lowly servant. From this time all generations shall call me blessed. The Almighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. He has scattered the proud in their conceit. He has cast down the mighty from their thrones. He has lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and he has sent the rich away empty. I believe that this song carried Mary through her time of isolation, and it gave her hope. Hope in the God who promises victory to folks like her. And so, although today she stands in isolation, she carries with her the title, Saint Mary of Victories. It would be at least 3 days before Mary would see that victory. And even then, it would be hard to understand. But her day of isolation would lead to a day of reconciliation. A day when enemies become friends. A day when the slaves are set free. A day when salvation spreads to the four corners of the earth. A day when good news is preached to the poor. A day when men and women proclaim that Jesus is Lord and Caesar is not. A day when God's Spirit is poured out upon a once lost and isolated people. Our own day of isolation has the potential to lead us towards salvation and reconciliation. If only we recognize within ourselves and within each other the image of God, particularly in the least of these. And if we, like Mary, continue to sing the song of victory today and tomorrow, not only with our lips, but in our lives.